Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming in.
Pleasure.
Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, in the property world, I've been in property for the last 25 years in all formats. So I've been a financier, banker, an advisor, and a principal. And so I find that this helps me in what I do now, which is essentially to help companies, organizations who are either in trouble or feel that they could be doing better.
Yeah.
So essentially, I spend my time consulting.
So through that wealth of experience, you've seen the growth of the initial users of data, moving from traditional property markets and how they run through human connections, network, to better use of data, to use of data in decision making, to now the age of AI. How has that changed the market?
Well, I think not enough is my immediate response.
Yeah.
Because there hasn't been wide adoption of AI, there's no perceived disadvantage in not embracing AI, if you know what I mean. So I think that will change in time, because I believe AI for us all will have a bigger impact than the Industrial Revolution in cognate terms in Victorian times. We are entering a new world. We are in a new world.
Yeah.
But the property industry has never been a great embracer of technology.
Yeah, I also hear things like, the things I hear are around, it's essentially an oligopoly. The market is regulated or owned by a few large companies.
Yes.
And so if none of them blink, why change?
Yeah.
And they're price setters and they're comfortable in that position.
Yes.
There's always an argument of property is not a commodity. Every apartment is different. The views, the location, the size, the pricing would be different. And because property are not commodities, it's hard to use AI where AI excels at things like commodities.
Yes.
But there are areas where AI is uniquely suited to make change.
Yes.
And to improve operational efficiencies, to drive revenue, to reduce costs. Where do you see some of the biggest opportunities today?
Well, an obvious one is in the build-to-rent sector, where you don't have quite the same characteristics you've described, because you have, for the large players, you have large numbers of units, you have turnover of tenants, and so on and so forth. And so this is an area where, to an extent, as you know, technology has been embraced, but it's still only to an extent.
Yeah.
And I think that if I were in the BTR industry, I would want to make better informed decisions. I'd ideally like to predict the future. I'd ideally like to know what drives my tenants exactly. You know, how much rent do I think I can get away with? This is now knowable through the use of machine learning tools and so on and so forth.
You've identified a couple of really good use cases that we're working on at the moment. But they're very siloed. They're very unique pieces of work that resolves a particular problem and exam question.
Yeah.
I find what's interesting from my perspective is speaking to property executives. They're not setting budgets to really use AI to revolutionize how they do things and change their ways of working. When I go to conferences, I see lots of IoT, so Internet of Things, and sensors being placed in all the buildings and so on. And this leads to better building management systems and information. But everything is done in silo, everything is done outside of each other, to the exclusion often of what is core to the business. And it's interesting that this reluctance continues to exist, to really invest, to really say, we're going to invest X millions in really making it work, to give the execs a better view across the portfolio of what's happening in their portfolio.
There's been great reluctance, and you're 100% correct. There is not a holistic view being taken. This stems originally from the fact, of course, that landlords in the old days didn't have any responsibilities.
Yeah.
Though recently the government's tried to unstack the deck, it's certainly in residential, but the fact is, the classic scenario is a tenant calling the landlord and saying, the roof's got a leak.
Yeah.
And the landlord says, why are you calling me? Now this is changing, of course, because if I'm a tenant or client, I want two things. I want certainty of cost, and I want to know it's all going to work.
Yeah.
And I want responsiveness. If something does go wrong, I want action. And as a landlord, as an owner, I think you need to know stuff. But the question is, what do you really, really need to know? And if we scroll back a bit, Because we all know there are some very, very exciting bespoke technologies that you can build. But if we go back to the basics of data science, the property industry is pretty bad at data.
Yeah.
Just as generically.
Yeah.
And often it doesn't know how bad it is. It doesn't know how bad. And we both had experience. You go to a big organization even and say, how's your day? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Yes, we sort of spent a lot of time. And say, well, shall we have a log?
Yeah.
You have a log.
And it all falls apart.
You have a log. Yeah, actually, it's awful.
Yeah.
So I think there's two basic tenets here. One is understanding where you are and what you've got in depth, in a reliable, single source of truth way. Enabling everybody in the organization who interacts with the property in any way whatsoever to have access to the same data. The second thing is, I think it's sort of like there's a deck of cards. Let's say we're playing poker. You'd love to know what hand everybody's holding, right? Then you can, of course, there'd be no point in the game at that point. But having big clues would be helpful. So I think that if I can have tools that help me to forecast, actually we can learn a lot from the history and then use that in part with lots of other data tools to help predict the future. A machine can help you make better decisions faster. I don't know why anybody wouldn't buy that proposition. I mean, it's
absolutely, because execs will tell you, I've been in this market for 30 years, I have experience, my gut tells me what to do.
Yeah.
Is often the answer. We did a workshop with a retirement house builder recently, and we looked at the value proposition, and it was identical to their two closest competitors. Exactly the same type of properties, at very, very similar prices, targeting the same markets. The only uniqueness was that we have a slightly different land bank than they do.
Yeah.
That was it. The entire proposition was the same. And I was challenging the exec saying, don't you want to be different? Don't you want to use AI to enhance your propositions, a lot of things you do and how you operate and so on? And he goes, well, no, because the market is growing, rising tide raises all boats, all those sorts of things.
Yes.
We're doing well, we have steady growth, our shareholders are happy, why rock the boat?
Yeah.
But so you in your position as advising lots of boards and lots of companies, how do you pass that message along that there needs to be change?
There needs to be an event. Typically, there needs to be an event.
You'd think COVID would be that event.
You would think, and for some it was, because for some it was.
I speak to commercial real estate owners here in the city. They go, oh yeah, but people are going back to work, it's fine. Just wait another year or two and we'll be back to normal.
Yes.
So why change? Because, after COVID, people didn't come to the office and we were worried. But now we're finding void rates are coming down. Actually, it's fine. Let's just wait another year. It'd be good. Yeah.
But that's an example which doesn't work. My experience is, unless there's an event, which might be company specific, it might be market, and obviously the global financial crisis is the ultimate example. Suddenly the game changed for everybody, more or less overnight.
Yeah.
Because even up to October 2008, people were going, it's going to be fine. Even though in March of 2008, Bear Stearns had gone, and it was clear that all sorts of things were going on, the property world was going to be fine.
Yeah.
Because tends to be the way the property world works. So unless and until a company has a problem, it's very hard because of the syndrome that you've described of everything's fine. Nobody's on our case, and it goes back to the point I was making earlier of there's no FOMO.
Yeah.
If everybody's sort of in the same vein, but so the change in the property industry has historically been very slow. And I remember he's a few CEOs ago, Land Security's CEO, when I was running Mapley, and he phoned me up and said, can we sit down? And so we had a help desk, so a 24/7 help desk that we had 100,000 people in the offices, any of them could call at any point in time, 24 hours a day. And we were chatting, and this former CEO of Nansei said to me, tell me, what do you do with the nuisance calls? I said, I'm sorry, what? The nuisance calls? yes, you've got all these bloody tenants phoning you up. Well, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, it's data.
Because
it's useful.
It's very useful
You
information.
can learn from that.
And we can sell them other things.
Yeah.
Because they phone up and say, I've got this problem. And you say,
And that's
well,
very true.
you know, within the contract we can do X, Y, and Z. And if you're prepared to pay a bit more, we can do A, B, and C. And it's surprising. And then you get to learn what's important.
Yeah.
And a trivial example, but makes the point, I think, is that we had a nightmare building in Bootle, and the tenants were always complaining. The windows didn't fit properly. There was always a, and they would call up Monday morning because they'd be grumpy. The weekend was over. And we could track the calls. We could see. Yeah. So we said, is there anything you really, really want? This would be like a ping pong table. So we put in a ping pong table, and the complaints stopped.
Well, it probably worked out. You could get more stuff. Keep calling.
So, you're right. It's all and the trick is to turn data into information.
Yeah.
And that's because data in and of itself is a good thing, but actually only partially useful.
Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting example. We worked with a housing association where we realised something like 78% of the calls were from 20% of the residents. It's the usual rule, right?
Yep.
And then actually, once you start analysing the calls, you start realising the reason for the call is often people are lonely. They want to chat. They want human interaction. And the housing association we worked with then started deploying sort of fish and chips vans and things like that in their estates.
Yes.
So people could come and have a chat. And the execs had to go and chat.
Yes. It's amazing.
And it was useful. But so going back a little bit to what you said about advising boards and the need for an agent of change, one of the things that has struck me in property is a lack of disruptors.
Yes.
If you look at fintech, you look at all of these, we've had the growth of Revolut and Monzo and so on that have completely changed the legacy banks.
Yes.
We've had in insurance lots and lots of changes that have changed the big incumbents. In property, the corporate map of the big players today is the same as it was 20 years ago, basically. A few of them have merged, particularly around the housing associations, but it's basically the same names.
Yeah.
Where are the disruptors?
Well, it's an interesting point, because there have in fact been disruptors. Mark Dixon with Regis, when that first started, most of the property was saying it'll never work.
Yeah.
That'll never work.
Yeah.
And for a while it worked very well, and then of course it stopped working because, and I've got a huge amount of respect for Mark, he's built a fantastic business, but his view was, I don't care what landlords charge me because I'm charging more. But he made the sort of Northern Rock mistake of the mismatch. He was shipping in long-term liabilities, and he had short-term assets. Yeah. Then WeWork comes along. It's not doing. It was doing something. I mean, Regis was originally, as you know, a sort of premium brand and
more corporate focused.
WeWork comes along and it's more individual focused, and it's for the new generations. And that hasn't panned out. Now, that hasn't panned out not because necessarily the idea is bad, but the execution was terrible. You just go out and take loads of office space and hope that you can fill it. And again, you would expect a modern disruptor like that to use a lot of technology to help predict. But of course, in the modern world, everybody wants to be the billion-dollar whale, so you just do it. So, but my point is that both of those businesses, Mark has reborn. WeWork is not going to be reborn as WeWork because, as I say, the execution. So the traditional property industry doesn't work. So I think, in general, the property world has been slow to adapt.
I see a lot of low-hanging fruits in the residential sector. Property management, we've touched on. I think there's big incumbents like Firstport who are massively inefficient. And I think there's enormous market demand for greater transparency, for really understanding where your service charges are going, for having a bit more of a voice in how your building is managed, for even documentation and self-serve.
Yes.
Being able to download my lease, understanding what my rights are, all those sorts of
Yes.
things. Why aren't there really good self-serve platforms for tenants?
Yeah.
But I also think a market that needs to be disrupted is the agency market. And I'm enthusiastic and optimist because I see changes coming through. Zillow has recently sort of launched a sort of immersive VR platform, so you can visit homes in VR from home or from your agents.
Oh.
From a corner in their office, you sit there and you can visit 15 homes in the space of an hour. But if I was in the market to launch a disruptive company, property management is agents, and I think also the construction supply chain.
I fully agree, and that is all the things you've named.
Yeah.
I would name as well, because they obviously could work better. I mean, I think they could obviously work better, and people can always come up with excuses why not. But actually, there needs to be a disruptor. There needs to be disruption in these areas so that we create the FOMO,
Yeah.
or we put people out of business in the nicest possible way. Those who don't adapt die. But then there'd be a whole bunch of people saying, "Oh, I'm going to my job."
Yeah.
See, this is part of the fear. AI is going to take my job away.
Yeah.
Let's not have people filling their day with mundane clerical administrative tasks that actually a machine could do.
Yeah.
And not only would a machine do it, they do it better. They do it quicker.
Yeah.
And reading leases is a classic example, right? If I've got thousands of leases, or even hundreds of leases, or even tens of leases, and I want to understand, for example, my exposure to lease breaks,
Yeah.
the machine can tell me in seconds.
Absolutely.
Historically, it's taken, you have to phone your lawyers, you have to phone your legal department, whatever it is, and say,
And you
can
need
you go and look
interns
at
to
all
go
the
through
leases?
them.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and this is now easy. This is,
Yeah.
and I think the thing is, what I encourage clients to do is actually not necessarily take a huge leap. You don't need
Yeah.
to sort of go bleeding edge and say, "Oh, we're going to AI the whole business." This is probably not a smart move for anybody, but let's start using, in the most basic ways, let's figure out how good our data is. Let's figure out how we can give everybody in the firm access to the same data. Let's figure out, how we can automate day-to-day processes.
Yeah.
The need for human intervention
Doesn't go away.
doesn't go away, despite
But that's a hard message.
Arthur C. Clarke.
It's a difficult message to pass on because people still feel threatened.
They feel threatened. And if property people like to be busy. And I'm like, well, there's good busy and there's just busy.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
So I think in closing, if you were to look into your crystal ball, where do you think the property sector will be in terms of adoption of AI in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, where it should be is fully adoptive.
Where will it be?
Where it's likely to be 50%. Quite a lot of businesses are hiring technology innovation officers or similar title, but so that's a good thought.
Yeah.
But actually, it's often in a vacuum. It's like, we got to have one of the people are hiring these people, so we'll get one.
Yeah.
No, I think, but it goes back to the same point of specify.
Yeah.
What is it that makes the difference?
Yeah.
What is it that you need? And then work back from it. And eventually, yes, bring it in-house. But actually, bringing in-house the wrong person or the wrong team is worse than not having a team at all.
Yeah.
First, figure out very clearly what your value proposition is.
Yeah.
If you've done that, then prioritize the things that are important here and now.
Yeah.
Whether they are challenges or opportunities doesn't matter. Preferably a bit of both. And then third, get broad management buy-in to the fact that things have to change.
Yeah.
If you have those ground conditions, the rest becomes much easier.
Robin, huge thank you.
Not at all. Thank you.
Very interesting. Very good. Thanks so much for your time.
Not at all. Anytime.
And a pleasure to have you today.
Likewise.
Thank you.